Our reading today is, each of us can make a difference. Politicians and visionaries will not return us to the sacredness of life. That will be done by ordinary men and women who together or alone can say, remember to breathe, remember to feel, remember to care. Let us do this for our children and ourselves and our children's children.
As I write the beginning of this sermon, it is Sunday, November 6th, 2016. The election is not yet decided. The path of our country is not yet clear. But what is clear is that this has been a political season of discontent, of disunity, of despair. This presidential election has been unlike any other we have experienced in our nation's 240-year history. And the reality of it is that this election didn't solve anything. The election that at this writing has not yet taken place did not solve anything. But what it has done is unearthed from the archaeological deposits of our history and our psyche artifacts of hatred and division and fear and greed that we would have liked to have thought were long dead, buried in some cemetery that would never be disturbed. But unbeknownst to us, or at least unbeknownst to those of us who are in such a position of privilege that we never felt the rumblings, a pipeline has cut across the rivers of our nation's heartland and soulland, carrying the foul detritus of history, ruptured this election cycle, spewing forth all the ugliness that we wanted to pretend didn't exist, so long as we, those of us with power and privilege, never had to see it. Vitriol seeping into our common identity that we had hoped could be safely routed underground, out of sight and out of mind, while we politely drink craft beer and cheer at football games just above the fault line. And so I sit here writing on my Sunday off a sermon that in some way doesn't depend on who won or who lost, in order to find its way home on this Sunday, November 13th. Because regardless of who our new president will be, there is some major damage that needs to be repaired. Tuesday didn't miraculously heal the damage done or solve the differences. Did any of you wake up Wednesday morning feeling all better? I sure didn't. Now that the people have spoken with their vote, things didn't miraculously get better because so much of what was said leading up to Tuesday was so damaging. And the fact that such bigoted and hateful rhetoric was spoken by a major party candidate running for the highest office in our nation is particularly scary, because it gave permission to those in our country who had been quietly racist, quietly misogynistic, quietly xenophobic, to shout out loud. It gave a political patina of respectability to using racial and sexual and religious slurs against those whom their platform would exclude. And not only to use slurs, but also to threaten detention, deportation, and destruction of equal rights. And not only to threaten, but to engage and use violence against those who disagreed with their stance. So regardless of who won, those of us who have felt the seepage from the pipeline of bigotry and intolerance need to find a place of wholeness and rest, whether we identify as a person of color, a transgender person, a queer person, a woman, a person with disabilities, an immigrant, a refugee. We have seen how not only strangers, but also family members and friends, those who know us, who say they love us, still voted for a candidate and a platform that would deny us fundamental human rights. And those folks are still out there. It'll make Thanksgiving interesting for many, I'm sure. The masks of benign indifference stripped away to reveal an uglier core. So what do we do now? What are we called to do in the aftermath and the aftershocks of this cultural upheaval? Well, we're called to bring restoration to our nation, to our communities, to our families and our homes. What we are called to do is to stand in the breach and offer healing and hope and wholeness. And we don't do that by shouting louder than those who stand against us. The equality and justice that is a hallmark of our faith. We do that not by hurling insult at those who would seek to deny the inherent worth and dignity of every human that informs everything we do as a people of faith. As our Lord once said, we cannot dismantle the Master's house using the Master's tools. We do it by remembering, in the words of our reading this morning, that politicians and their rhetoric do not return us to the sacredness of life. We do that. You and me, ordinary citizens who refuse to let the rising tide of intolerance wash away all that we have worked for so long and so diligently. We do that by, first of all, remembering to breathe. That is the most important tool in our toolbox. Our breathing is the first defense against panic, against fear, against hatred, against hardness of heart. Our breath creates an expansiveness of spirit. According to Oxford dictionaries, the very definition of the word inspire is to be filled with the urge or the ability to do or feel something creative. But its root is simply to breathe in. When we breathe, when we remember to breathe first, we are opening ourselves up to more than what we see and what we hear. We are opening ourselves up to creative possibilities. We are inflating our hope and deflating the impulse to be negative, to lash out, or to hide away. One of the words for the Holy Spirit in the Hebrew Scriptures is ruach. And what it means, literally, is to breathe. But what it means, as it was used in the everyday life of the people of Israel, it was the description given to a mother who held her newborn baby in her arms and she breathed life into it. They didn't spank the little guy, they breathed life. So ruach is this image of the Spirit breathing life into us. And when we breathe first, we allow the holiest Spirit in us to breathe life into new possibilities, barely formed, but present, even in the midst of despair. And the second way we push back the tide of intolerance and fear, we're told, is to feel. To not try to push away our feelings of pain or anger or confusion or anxiety, or fear, or grief. This is not the time for Pollyanna prescriptions of, I'm okay, you're okay, we're okay together. Because this nation is not okay right now. Nor is this the moment to burst into the sunny song of Annie, the sun will come out tomorrow. it just kind of makes you want to say STFU, doesn't it? This is the time to step back, and again, as I write this, regardless of who will be our next president, which I still don't know as I write this, I can say that, wow, sharp weapons of war were used in this election process. Arrows of deception that poisoned the minds of so many. Hand grenades of hatred that were lobbed into the hearts of so many, exploding for all the world to see. Landmines hidden in the thicket of family loyalties that proved there was no safe space for many of us to walk. And that has left us on this first Sunday after the election with wounds that cut deep, and some we fear that can never be healed. It's not pleasant to feel these things. But here's the deal. Unless we can feel our pain of these attacks and the pain of the betrayal of those we thought loved us, we will never be able to feel the healing balm of hope, the powerful antidote of love that fills this place and so many others on this day. Until we can acknowledge our wounds, we cannot acknowledge the wounds of others. It is only when we can say, we hurt, that we can find wholeness, and we can help others, including those who voted in a way that made us feel betrayed, including those who might yet be shown the depth of their own jagged cuts of racism and sexism and homophobia and Islamophobia and all those toxic cultural diseases exposed in the light of this day. We feel our way to our own healing, and then we help others. Bless you. Just doing my job. I haven't said that in a while, I'm sorry. We feel our way to our own healing, and then we help others feel the way to theirs. And in this way, we, I was going to say begin, but that's not true. We continue the work of healing our nation. This work that has been going on for more than 240 years. We breach the flow of the toxic seepage from the pipeline of oppression and hatred by remembering to do what we do best. And that is be caring. How many of you have seen that meme with a quote by our favorite neighbor, Mr. Rogers? It's always making the rounds on Facebook after mass shootings or terrorist attacks or other examples of human violence. He said, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping.'" We need to remember to be caring, to be the helpers, to roll up our sleeves and wade into the filth that spilled into our public life and be the ones to say, we're going to look for survivors. We're going to dredge through the polluted rivers and streams of our nation and help restore it. We're going to do this by refusing to engage in the dialogue of hatred, vengeance, and fear. We're going to do this by helping to make America kind again. Another one of my favorite memes I've seen. We're going to do this by meeting our neighbors, paying it forward at Starbucks, helping at a women's shelter, or an animal rescue shelter, or by cleaning up the park, or by bringing food to those experiencing homelessness in Acacia Park, or by checking into what it takes to host a refugee family from Syria. We're going to do this by donating our time and money to organizations such as Planned Parenthood, the NAACP, the ACLU, the Southern Poverty Law Center, CASA. We're going to wear safety pins to show we're safe people. This is the only thing I added from the sermon that I wrote last week. In World War II, the Dutch resistance wore safety pins to show that they were against the Nazis and that they would be a safe space for people. Norwegians wore paper clips on their lapels to show that we're all clipped together. We can all be strung along together. And so there's a movement about wearing safety pins. And we have them out at the visitors table. If you don't have one yet, you can get one. And going to the affirmation rally that's this afternoon at Acacia Park from 1 to 3, where I and other speakers will speak up and say we will rise above the language and rhetoric of hate. It's an affirmation of the queer people in our midst, and the trans people in our midst, and the women in our midst, and the disabled in our midst, and the poor in our midst, and those who believe in climate change in our midst. It's an affirmation to say we are with you. We're calling ourselves a safety pin brigade. And then we're going to march in a show of affirmation that despite the election results on Tuesday, we will not let our country be trumped by hate. We will not let who was chosen president determine how we create the United States of America. We get to choose how to do that. We get to choose how we are America in our families and communities and neighborhoods and homes. We're going to do this by remembering, as Ram Dass said, at the end of the day, we're all just walking each other home. We're going to walk each other home. We're going to do this by refusing to let negativity and fear and violence and the othering of some folks and the hatred of the other have the last word. This has been an election like no other in the history of our nation. It has shaken many of us to our core. It has shown us how much work there is still left to do, how much sewage has been seeping from this pipeline all along, leaching its way into the water we drink, the crops we raise, the air we breathe. That centuries-old seepage is what enabled this pipeline to burst this season. But all that means is that we now know with greater clarity how much cleanup needs to be done. As Parker Palmer stated, I continue to harbor the hope that this political season of our discontent will help us think more clearly and deeply about who we are as a people. And I would add, to then do the work to heal our nation. See, this isn't about who won or lost. This is about who we will choose to be as a nation going forward. In the words of the poet David White, this is not the age of information. This is not the age of information. Forget the news and the radio and the blurred screen. This is the time of loaves and fishes. People are hungry, and one good word is bread for 1,000. So what is your one good word that you will take to feed our nation? Just say it out loud. What is your good word? Love. What were some others? Respect. Justice. Joy. Yes. Said by Joy. Standing up. Yes. You have enough room. You have enough bread in this room to feed thousands. We can do it. We can do it. With our good word, with our fishes and loaves, with our tiny tasks of kindness, with our safety pins, and our bold hearts, we can do it. And that's what I invite you to do in the aftermath of this election, is to share the loaves and fishes of hope and peace and justice and love. Because that way, no matter which candidate has won, we all win. May it be so.